letting a stranger in to use the bathroom. Okay, maybe I sized him up. I knew I could snap his little twig legs if I needed to.
This added another layer of unease to the events, and left many onlookers thankful that Nicholas had not turned aggressive when confronted with the reality of his actions. In January 2019, another terrifying case of YouTube-based stalking emerged. This case is unique in that the streamer had managed to remain anonymous, with details only emerging after the trial had already concluded. Although the victim's name was never published, the details of her stalker's harassment and the plans he had in mind for her were disturbing to say the least, and only grew more with every new development. They showed an imagination for intense violence, and a desire for control that could only be forcefully obtained. The stalker's name was Keo Ni, a 24-year-old from Estonia who met his victim through the online game RuneScape in 2017, after discovering her through her prominent blog on the subject. On March 8th of that year, he wrote her an email full of pleas for intimacy and assurances that he was the only man in the world that could make her feel true love. In many ways, the message gave a glimpse into Ni's deranged perspective, such as when he wrote, "I may be a little psycho, but it's okay because we're all a little messed up in the head if you really think about it." He also referenced the, quote, thoughts and plans that he had been developing for his victim, although he could not explain these thoughts because, quote, Mr. Shadow said no. But this disconnect from reality, both in how Ni viewed himself and how he viewed his imaginary relationship with his victim, would soon become frighteningly real. The emails continued to come, with the next one starting out apologetic, but quickly shifting to demanding and threatening. Ni said there was no third option for them beyond a friendship or romantic relationship, and that he would ruin her life if she refused to respond to him. He also refused to walk away from the imaginary connection, and that this behavior, quote, truly shows how much I care about you and how much I love you. Later that day, another email came that shed all pretense of affection. The stalker promised to fly to the UK and make it his, quote, life goal to find and kill his victim. He wrote a long, gruesomely detailed description of his plans to kidnap, torture, and violate the blogger. The language of the email grew increasingly reverent as it went along, with Ni even claiming that his actions would be celebrated. One more email came that day and showed that its writer had fully departed from reality. It contained passages such as, "I am darkness and you are light. I am psycho and you're a social butterfly." This real-life Joker rambled about how their relationship was impossible, but also that his victim was not deserving of the relationship in the first place. After this, the messages briefly stopped, with the stalker having seemingly spiraled out of the fixation. But on April 23rd, they started up again. Ni sent the blogger images of himself with flowers and bottles of alcohol, again apologetic and desperate for any sort of interaction. When he again received no response, Ni sent a series of sexual messages so graphic that some news outlets refused to print them, and began to make more threatening promises of what would happen when he found her. From there, Ni's communications largely came in the form of what court documents would call bizarre tweets at the blogger, who continued to steadily ignore them. The most concerning of these messages included a series of photos of the victim's house that Ni took after finally traveling to Liverpool in January 2019, with the threat that if she continued to decline his requests, she would, quote, see what I am capable of. Shortly afterwards, he would make good on his words. The same day, Ni was arrested outside of the anonymous creator's home. According to her father, the stalker had simply knocked on the front door, and after greeting him, the older man had noticed that he and his wife's names were written on his notepad. Sensing danger, her father managed to convince Ni that his daughter did not actually live there, and he quickly called the police once he was out of earshot. At the time, the blogger was hiding upstairs, just trying to stay out of sight and not provoke the stalker any further. While Ni managed to get away after that, when officers came by the house to drop off panic alarms the day after, they noticed him watching from nearby. When they approached him, he fled the scene and jumped into a car being driven by an older man. The police caught up with the stalker and dragged him out of the vehicle, arresting the driver as well. The man turned out to be Ni's father, who had offered to drive his son to Liverpool to see a football match, and had no idea what his true intentions were. While Lee's dad was intentionally under suspicion for assisting an offender, he was soon released without any charges. When the stalker's possessions were examined, he was found to be carrying a bizarre kit including gloves, an eye mask, a roll of tape, scissors, a screwdriver, a hip flask full of ammonia, a syringe, and a large golden adult toy. He had excuses for some of the items. He claimed that the mask was for his flight, and that the toy was just a face massager. But there was no explanation for the rest, and the investigation proceeded forward. Once his trial was underway, Nee's resistance to reality quickly fell away. He concluded that he had made an extensive effort to find his victim, and eventually admitted to 2 counts of stalking. But he denied any intention to commit a sexual offense, a more serious charge that the judge chose not to pursue after Nee argued that he would not have brought his father with him if he intended to commit a crime of that nature. The stalker had no fixed address at the time of trial, and sentencing was briefly adjourned while he underwent psychiatric testing to determine his mental state. After their evaluations, the doctors determined that Nee had a combination of autism and ADHD. And these inconclusive diagnoses led them to deem the troubled young man unsuitable for further treatment in a hospital due to the danger he posed to the public. Jonathan Savage led the defense in court, admitting that while some of his emails had been, quote, extremely distressing, Nee's true motivation was the pursuit of the relationship he had imagined, not violence. He also defended the strange kit of items that had been found in Nee's car, doubling down on the adult toy being just a muscle relaxer. The defendant's mother added that the syringe was intended for Nee to use on himself for an unspecified medical condition, while the ammonia was used to bring him around when he suffered from an epileptic fit. The bottom line of the defense was that Nee did not intend his victim any real harm, and that the items had to be considered in context with his newly diagnosed mental state. Judge Clement Gladstone accepted some of the defense's arguments, but did not concede that Nee's actions were without malicious intent. While she acknowledged that there might be an innocent explanation for each of the individual items in the kit, their presence together was more indicative of a planned action, and that the stalker had likely seen a golden opportunity to pursue his victim when his father had suggested the trip to Liverpool. While the defendant had previously told the police that the content of his emails was a joke, the judge did not treat it as such, and reinforced the stress and fear that Nee had inflicted on his victim, leaving her with persistent sleeping problems. Gladstone called cyberstalking a plague on the 21st century, and sentenced Nee to 21 months in jail, while also imposing an indefinite restraining order to better protect his victim and her family. The stalker's passport was taken, and he was set to be repatriated upon his release from prison. Even when faced with a stalker whose harassment seems never-ending, many victims choose not to speak for fear of worsening the situation. Often the public will only hear about these incidents when these unfortunate individuals are pushed too far. And in 2020, popular vlogger Yui Pion shared her story after reaching that point. According to her video on the subject, she had been patient with her stalker for over a year, warning him repeatedly that she would report him. While this would sometimes give her a break from the harassment, it would always resume. At first, the behavior was contained to just digital communication, but still went far enough that the vlogger said the stalker was able to find out which train she was taking or airplane seat she would be occupying when traveling. The line into more direct harassment was crossed soon after. Yui Pion mentioned that the turning point from confusion into fear had come when he had suddenly showed up at her house. At first, she had assumed that the person was just a particularly dedicated fan, but the true nature of his intentions soon became clear. This first in-person encounter was followed by many more, including a time when she was chased through the streets of her city. Eventually, he would even follow her during a live stream that she was broadcasting on a Korean streaming platform. Yui Pion showed a screenshot from that stream, where the stalker could be seen directly behind her, typing more abusive messages into the chatbot even as she begged him to stop. One of his comments that day read, "We just met by fate while I was passing by. It was just an accident." But it was too late for that defense to have any weight. This was the only time that Yui Pion spoke out publicly against this individual, so perhaps her response was enough to shake his obsession. There could always be more to this story that has been obfuscated by legal proceedings, but hopefully the streamer has been able to reclaim a sense of safety both on and offline, and she no longer has to keep looking over her shoulder as she shares her life with her audience. In the 2010s, Roman and Brittany Atwood were possibly the biggest YouTube couple in the world, who started off with prank videos before shifting to family vlogs. Their flagship channel alone had accumulated over 15 million subscribers by the turn of the decade, with consistent uploads since 2013 that gave the internet an extensive look at the adventures and pranks that their family shared. But in early 2020, that steady stream of content started to slow down, eventually stopping altogether. This wasn't just on YouTube either. Seemingly out of nowhere, the couple's entire social media presence went dark. Their audience was confused at first, but soon a more general concern emerged. After spending so long dedicated to the platform, what could have caused them to disappear? On January 23, 2021, a new video finally appeared, in which Roman and Brittany explained what had kept them offline for so long.
I'm excited to make this video, but it's like we have to kind of relive what's been going on, so we need to talk about it, we need to explain to you guys, and it's not really stuff that we want to rethink about, so it's gonna be tough.
Apparently, a resourceful and relentless group of stalkers had been aggressively pursuing the family for a considerable amount of time. But this group was not trying to foster any personal connections. Instead, they sent them a constant barrage of texts, voicemails, and Discord messages, threatening assault and death. Although Roman and Brittany regularly changed their personal information, this group was still able to track them down, and the harassment escalated wildly from there. Over time, these invasions into the Atwoods' lives continued to get more direct, and grew far more dangerous. One of the more frightening incidents occurred at a funeral, where the group called in a bomb threat that further shook the already grieving family. Unbeknownst to the couple, the hackers also contacted their car insurance company and canceled their coverage. They received a call from their representative asking why they had decided to cancel as they were out driving unprotected without even knowing it. The goal of the stalkers seemed to be to destabilize the family entirely, and they continued to send the fake mail to their home from fake businesses such as abortion clinics, which deepened the couple's fear for their children's lives. The content of their messages included threats to burn their house down, leaving Roman and Brittany in a constant state of anxiety as to what line would be crossed next. Even with this long list of violations, the couple stated that a video explaining the full extent of what they had suffered could be an hour long, and their breakdown had barely scratched the surface. Due to the intense nature of the stalking, the FBI eventually became involved and dug deep into the torrent of abuse to find its origin. Obviously, the couple did not reveal the specifics of the Bureau's investigation, but they had apparently managed to bring the harassment to an end, and the family now felt safe enough to return to social media. Soon their content output started to flow more steadily again, although not quite at the same volume as before. Perhaps the experience had made Roman and Brittany more cautious about how much was being shared through their channel, and what vulnerabilities might be on display without intention. They called the return a fresh start, and both creators expressed excitement and optimism about the return. Although their audience was happy to see them back, the road still had a few bumps ahead. Roman would later address the ordeal in a 2022 episode of Logan Paul's Impulsive podcast, sharing more details now that the pain and stress weren't so fresh. He reiterated that they did not leave YouTube willingly. They were told to by the FBI as their investigation had progressed, which only happened after an extended period of time where the couple had to continue to post as if everything was normal. As Roman told it, the vloggers had to essentially let the abuse happen.
Joe Rogan came out and let it rip, okay? In the most expected way possible. He came out and he let it rip. Joe Rogan, on his latest episode or whatever, gave a endorsement to RFK Jr., okay? Let's watch.
He's a legitimate guy. You know, before anybody started calling him an anti-vaxxer, which I thought he was too. I thought he was this nut, this like conspiracy theorist nut, until I read his book. I read the real Anthony.
Bro, you're a conspiracy theorist nut. So of course you read his book and you were like, oh, I agree with it. I love when people go, oh, dude, I thought he was a conspiracy theorist. The guy is a conspiracy theorist. And then I read his book about conspiracy theories and I agreed with them because I'm a conspiracy theorist. And I went, oh my God, everything clicked.
How much of this is real? Because if it's all real, this is sane. And we live in a world where we're being manipulated by these health organizations that are being paid by the pharmaceutical drug interests. And these pharmaceutical drug...
It's so funny that these guys are basically describing capitalism, how it works, but then like still attributing it to like some random evil. This is like at the heart of liberalism. That's why liberalism, which is anti-materialist in terms of like analyzing the world, has a real hard time avoiding, you know, Nazi sentiments and fascist sentiments, because like every single conspiracy theory ultimately leads to an outgroup, and that outgroup of like shadowy figures almost always is considered Jewish, right? That's how so many of these conspiracy theories, whether it's like flat earthers that think like NASA is owned by the Jews, or any number of different conspiracy theories that like probably start off as not very dangerous, almost always needs to find a scapegoat, okay? The scapegoat can take different forms. You can call them globalists, the elite,